In 1933, with Spain on the brink of a civil war, a filmmaker ventured into one of the country's most impoverished regions and returned with something that defies categorization to this day. What appeared to be a documentary about extreme poverty was, in fact, something more subversive. Luis Buñuel's Land Without Bread is a deeply unsettling film that continues to provoke audiences nearly a century after its making. Shot in the region of Las Urdes in Spain, it presents itself as an ethnographic film while undermining the very foundations of documentary filmmaking. Today, we explore how this remarkable work anticipated the mockumentary genre decades before the term came to be, and what it tells us about the truth, representation, and the ethics of documentary films. Born in 1900 in the rural Spanish province of Teruel, Luis Buñuel emerged as one of cinema's most distinctive and uncompromising voices. After studying engineering and philosophy in Madrid, where he befriended artists like Salvador Dalí and Federico García Lorca, Buñuel moved to Paris and immersed himself in the surrealist movement. His first film, 1929's Un Chien Andalou, co-created with Dalí, shocked audiences with its dreamlike imagery and deliberate assaults on bourgeois sensibilities. This was followed by L'Âge d'Or in 1930, which scandalized society further with its anti-clerical themes and sexual content. By the time Buñuel turned his camera on Las Urdes in 1933, he had already established himself as a filmmaker intent on disrupting conventions and challenging comfortable assumptions. Land Without Bread would be his last Spanish project before the Civil War forced him into exile, beginning a career that would span Mexico, the United States, and France, culminating in masterpieces like Viridiana, The Exterminating Angel, and The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. Throughout his 5-decade career, Buñuel maintained his commitment to using film as a tool for social critique and psychological exploration. Since its earliest days, cinema has been pulled between two competing impulses, realism and illusion. The Lumiere brothers captured everyday life, workers leaving a factory, a train arriving at a station, presenting reality as it was before the camera. Meanwhile, filmmakers like Georges Méliès embraced fantasy, using the new medium of film to create magical worlds of imagination. This tension between realism and artifice would become central to the development of documentary film as a distinct form of cinema. As documentaries evolved in the early 20th century, they came to claim so-called objectivity, presenting themselves as neutral windows into reality rather than constructive narratives. Soviet filmmaker Dziga Vertov championed what he called the kino eye. The idea that the camera could capture the unmediated truth, revealing reality in ways that human perception could not. His 1929 film, Man with a Movie Camera, celebrated the camera's power to document life as it is, while still acknowledging the constructive role of edition. Meanwhile, in theatre, German playwright Bertolt Brecht was developing his concept of the alienation effect, deliberately disrupting audience immersion to encourage critical reflection rather than emotional absorption. Rather than allowing spectators to lose themselves in the illusion of reality, Brecht wanted them to remain aware of the artificial nature of the performance. These intellectual currents, Vertov's faith in the truth of documentary, and Brecht's skepticism towards realist representations converged in the emergent practice of documentary reflexivity, where filmmakers acknowledge the constructed nature of their work. Land Without Bread emerged at this historical moment, but also within a very Spanish context. In 1933, 3 years before the Civil War, Spain was mired with economic recession, growing unemployment, and a rise of national Catholicism. Traditional documentary approaches seem inadequate to capture the complex crisis the country was experiencing. Buñuel, having already established himself as a surrealist, turned his attention to Las Urdes, a remote mountainous region known for its extreme poverty. His film begins like a conventional ethnographic documentary, with an authoritative narrator explaining the strange customs and harsh conditions of the Urdanos. But viewers attentive to the film's tone detect something unusual from the beginning. The narrator's voice is cold, detached, and occasionally condescending, more like a parody of documentary authority than a genuine attempt to educate.
Voici l'église de la Alberca. 2 têtes de mort dans leur niche semblent présider aux destinées du village.
3 minutes into the film, we encounter the first scene that explicitly reveals Buñuel's reflexive approach. In a crowded town square, men on horseback race up and down, attempting to tear the heads off roosters suspended from ropes. The camera captures this violent spectacle from multiple angles, including reaction shots from the crowd. This scene directly challenged Vertov's concept of the kino eye. Where Vertov believed in the camera's ability to represent reality as it is, Buñuel carefully constructed his shots to expose the fiction behind filmmaking. The sequences create tension through their graphic violence, the audience's shock, and most notably, the dissonance between action and narration. Listen to how the narrator admits that these images are rough, while ironically mentioning their duty to be objective.
En dépit de la cruauté de cette scène, notre devoir d'objectivité nous contraint à vous la montrer.
This signals that we're not watching a conventional ethnographic documentary, but something far more subversive. Buñuel is using documentary conventions while undermining them. The careful construction of the scene, from wide shots to close-ups and cuts to the audience, reveal its staged nature. A woman's indifference and a child's gleeful reactions feel deliberately choreographed. The multiple angles of the town square also reveal the crew's extended presence, taking away any pretense of neutral observation. And finally, there's this moment where the narrator breaks the tension of the animals' deaths by mentioning how the ritual
Cette fête sanguinaire cache sans aucun doute plusieurs symboles ou complexes sexuels que nous n'analyserons pas maintenant.
This combination of violence and pseudo-academic humor establishes Land Without Bread as a film that isn't entirely serious about its own documentary pretensions. While the rooster scene establishes the film's ironic tone, this school scene demonstrates how Buñuel uses visual juxtaposition to create meaning. We see a small bald child ringing a bell and a group of barefoot children walk into the schoolhouse. They enter and sit down, looking serious and frowning at the camera. The narrator informs us that these children are pilus, or pelados, hairless abandoned children who are taken care of by families in exchange for money. The children approach the blackboard and read together. One child writes, "Respect the property of others."
La morale que l'on enseigne à ces petits est la même que celle qui régit notre monde civilisé. Respecte le bien d'autrui.
This scene exemplifies Buñuel's proto-mockumentary technique through multiple layers of irony. The well-dressed teacher, completely ignored by the narration and the action, serves as a silent reminder of the class division the film critiques. The instruction to respect the property of others becomes darkly comical in a community defined by extreme poverty, mocking both documentary claims of neutrality and exposing the absurdity of teaching standard curriculum in such conditions, how Spanish society and government had failed this region. The ironic narrator returns with lines like,
Une image inattendue et choquante que nous découvrons dans l'école. Que peut bien faire ici cette gravure absurde?
in reference to a painting of a princess, and
À ces enfants affamés, on apprend comme partout ailleurs que la somme des angles d'un triangle est égale à 2 droits.
the narration oscillates between explicit and implicit mockery, though it is unclear who exactly Buñuel was trying to mock, and whether he succeeded in this. These classroom lessons become a commentary on how education can perpetuate social inequality. Buñuel's subversion of traditional documentary techniques mirror how official institutions use the appearance of reform to maintain the status quo. Perhaps the most infamous scene in the film shows a goat jumping around on a sharp, rocky cliff. Suddenly, the goat falls to his death, and the narrator informs us that the Urdanos can only eat goat meat when one falls accidentally, and that the goat's milk is reserved for the gravely ill.
La chèvre est l'animal qui résiste le mieux dans ces parages stériles. On réserve son lait aux malades graves. Il trempe dans ce lait le pain que les mendiants ramènent de loin et que l'on garde lui aussi pour les malades.
This is another of the many scenes in the film which focus on animal suffering. The narrator's tone is more neutral than in the rooster scene, but the contradictory information. Earlier in the film, we were told that everybody in this town is sick, yet goat's milk is reserved for the sick. At this point, Buñuel has created an environment where fact and fiction cannot be distinguished. The scene has clear continuity, something that would be a strength in any other film, but here reveals itself as fake. Buñuel had the goat shot so that it would fall, perpetuating the film's critique of documentary claims to authenticity. He forces the audience to confront the fact that what they're watching is not a neutral observation, but a constructed narrative, mirroring and mocking traditional documentaries. When Land Without Bread was made, the main purpose of documentaries was social reform or control, and therefore risked exploiting their subjects and their audiences. Buñuel's obvious staging exposes this tension, suggesting that even well-intended documentaries can perpetuate harm by objectifying their subjects. Together, these three scenes demonstrate the key features of what would later be termed mockumentary. The rooster scene employs documentary style while undercutting it with ironic narration. The school scene creates a satirical critique of both documentary observation and social inequality. The goat scene most explicitly reveals the fictional elements in Buñuel's approach while maintaining the documentary's facade of authenticity. They create the suspension of disbelief characteristic of mockumentaries. We know we are being deceived, but we can understand the underlying truths about poverty and exploitation being communicated through these deceptions. But was Buñuel actually creating a mockumentary in the modern sense? The term itself wouldn't be coined until decades later, and Buñuel's own statements about the film complicate our understanding of his intentions. As he told students at the University of Colombia in 1941, he wanted to transcribe the facts that reality offered me objectively without trying to interpret them, and even less invent them. This is a curious statement given the several instances of fiction presented as fact in the film. Perhaps Buñuel held a different concept of truth than most documentary filmmakers, seeing stage scenes as a way to reveal deeper social realities that mere observations might miss. Land Without Bread exists in this weird midpoint between documentary, satire, and avant-garde cinema, using fiction to paradoxically expose the truth. The film's relationship with the Ordanos people embodies the central paradox of documentary filmmaking. While Buñuel critiques the exploitative nature of documentaries, he necessarily participates in that same exploitation. His awareness of this contradiction sets him apart, but it does not absolve him of ethical responsibility. Even now, over 100 years later, the people of Las Urdes are marked by this documentary and have varying opinions of Buñuel himself and the impact that this film had on them and the image that the rest of Spain and the world holds over their region. In the final moments of Land Without Bread, Buñuel makes a surprising call to action. This shift from detached irony to serious political plea demonstrates the film's central paradox. For all its subversion of documentary truth claims, Land Without Bread ultimately appeals to a higher truth about social justice. Buñuel uses deception to reveal reality. The film's reception was as complicated as its content. Most viewers initially took it at face value as an ethnographic study of Las Urdes, proving Buñuel's point about audience complacency in accepting documentary truth. Upon its first private screening, the film was banned, considered insulting to Spain. In an attempt to get the film authorized, Buñuel held another private screening for Dr. Gregorio Marañón, then president of the patronage of Las Urdes. It didn't work. Marañón was scandalized that Buñuel had filmed the Rooster Festival instead of local dancing and claimed to have seen carts of wheat in town, refuting the film's repeated claims that bread was scarce. Marañón's focus on the dancing and wheat exemplifies precisely what Buñuel was trying to bring to light: the willful blindness to widespread conditions of poverty in Spain. Decades later, filmmakers would develop the mockumentary into a recognizable genre, using the documentary for comedy, satire, and social critique. Modern films and TV shows like The Office, What We Do in the Shadows, Abbott Elementary would play with documentary conventions to create fictional narratives that reveal truths about human behavior. But Land Without Bread remains unique even among mockumentaries. Unlike most later examples that clearly signal their fictional nature, Buñuel's film deliberately maintained ambiguity about what's real and what's staged, forcing viewers to confront their own assumptions about documentary truths and society. The questions Buñuel raised in 1933 remain relevant today. Modern documentaries routinely use reenactments, staged scenes, and selective editing to shape narratives while claiming to present the truth. Reality television claims to show unscripted human behavior while carefully manufacturing scenarios and storylines. In our digital age, where images can be manipulated, context removed, and artificial intelligence can generate convincing fake content, Buñuel's interrogation of visual truth feels more urgent than ever. If a documentary from 1933 could so effectively blur the line between fact and fiction, then what hope do we have of discerning truth in today's media landscape? Through staged scenes, ironic narration, and the exposure of its own fiction, Buñuel's proto-mockumentary anticipated a genre dedicated to questioning the very foundations of reality. And yet, beyond the film's critical commentary on societal complacency and the exploitative potential of the camera, a fundamental question persists. Can we ever truly discern the line between observation and manipulation? And more importantly, are we willing to confront the uncomfortable truths that lie beneath the surface of what we see? Buñuel understood that sometimes deception is the only way to reveal truth. By creating a documentary that deliberately undermined and mocked its own authority, he forced viewers to question not just what they were seeing on screen, but how they interpreted visual evidence in general. Land Without Bread stands as a reminder that documentaries don't simply record reality, they construct it. The film's legacy isn't just as a precursor to the mockumentary genre, but as a work that continues to challenge our understanding of how visual media can shape our perception of the truth. As we consume documentaries, news footage, and social media content today, Buñuel's subversive film reminds us to look beyond the surface, question the framing, and consider what might lie outside of the frame. The truth, as Buñuel knew, is never as straightforward as it appears. The region of Las Urdes has changed dramatically since Buñuel's time. Roads, schools, and healthcare have transformed living conditions. Yet economic inequality persists throughout Spain and globally, often invisible to those who don't wish to see it. In using fiction to expose the truth about Las Urdes, Buñuel created a work that transcends its specific time and place. Nearly a century later, Land Without Bread continues to raise uncomfortable questions about how we represent, perceive, and respond to human suffering, and whether our documentary traditions help or hinder our understanding of these realities. The staged death of a goat reveals more than 1,000 objective observations ever could. This is the paradox and the power of Buñuel's approach, a deception that brings us closer to understanding reality than documented facts alone. Through his proto-mockumentary, Buñuel anticipated not just a film genre, but our contemporary crisis of visual truth. By deliberately blurring the line between fact and fiction, he created a work that continues to challenge, provoke, and illuminate, reminding us that sometimes truth can only be found through deception.